The world is constantly attacked by worms, which are basically beings from another world. And to fight these creatures, there is a secret organization with members who have superpowers. Our protagonist has one of the most overpowered abilities. I'm not going to spoil what his power is, but basically people who have the same power as him end up dying very early. And even without wanting to, he ends up being recruited into this organization. This work has very beautiful art, and the characters are really cool. Before anything, don't forget to leave a like and comment what time you're watching. The story already begins with our protagonist, whose name is Ian, looking for a job. He wasn't finding the place and sees a little blonde girl, so he decides to call her to ask if she knew where the address was. The guy got embarrassed, and she was pretty rude, telling him to look at the sign. Up there, he sees the name of the company where he would do the interview. He says goodbye, thanking her. But deep down, Ian was furious, saying he felt like punching her. However, he would need to keep a happy face to get the job. And in the background, we see that there was a little girl watching him. When he arrives at the interview location, it was a beautiful girl who was asking the questions. Ian already gets all shy. Think of a shameless protagonist. He even imagines that it's gonna be great working there, because there are pretty women. However, the guy had been fired from his last jobs, and she even asks if by any chance he's lazy. In his defense, he says that the places ended up closing and that he's very unlucky. At that moment, that little girl who was spying on him arrives at the place. Her eyes start glowing, and both of them get startled by that terrifying look. Then she starts emitting a very strong light. The woman simply pulls out a gun and shoots that creature, and she even tells Ian to run away from there. That child wasn't human but a worm. However, Ian didn't know that and kept saying the woman was crazy. At that moment, that blonde girl appears. She was following that worm, and after yelling lightning, she launched the monster far away. Right after, she used her power to throw boxes at the worm and destroyed the whole place. At that moment, the creature showed its true form and charged at our hero. Then a huge explosion happened, emitting a very strong light. They even thought the boy had lost his life. Miss Kai found it strange because Ian was alive. Nothing had happened to him, and the little blonde girl said that in fact he had absorbed the worm. Their suspicions were right, he was a devourer. As they said goodbye, she said the boy passed the test, and now he had been hired to work at the nerd psychic department. But our boy here wasn't understanding anything. He even thought those women were villains, and thought he had ended up in a horror isekai. You'll see how this protagonist only gets into trouble. And unlike those goofy protagonists, this one's gonna get really pissed. He wasn't going to accept the job, but thinking it through and looking at the girls from this job, he ended up changing his mind. In the end, he still thought it was a terrible idea. The next day, he decided to go back to his job, which was doing ads dressed as a bear. A little boy kept bothering him. He couldn't stop thinking about those demons that attacked him. It felt like it was some fantasy tale. And he even witnessed with his own eyes a beautiful girl shooting a worm. At that moment, the boy's mother called him and said that kind of ad he was doing was indecent. And we see it was for a bar where only adults could enter. I know very well that you know what I'm talking about. So he said that woman could go screw herself. The little boy said he wanted to see the pretty women on the sign. And in that moment, he said that his current job was really humiliating. To his surprise, Miss Kai appears behind him. The guy gets super scared, and they keep saying they came to get him for work. In response, the guy said he didn't want to work with them. However, he wouldn't have a choice and would be forced to follow them. Upon hearing those words, he takes off running. Miss Kai jokes, saying to Sarah that it's gonna be hard convincing this boy. The blonde girl said she was sensing the presence of worms and would leave it to Kai to deal with Ian. Since she was going to eliminate the monsters, it was already getting dark, and he takes off his costume, putting it on top of the car. The worst of all was how they managed to find him. At that moment, the woman appears next to him, and the guy almost dies of a heart attack. He even asks how the hell she managed to find him again. She said she put a chip on him so she could track him. The guy asks if that wasn't illegal. In response, the hottie said that the nerd department can break all the laws. The guy starts freaking out in fear. But it was a joke. He had just downloaded an app on his phone that allowed her to see his location. At that moment, the guy apologizes, but says he wouldn't work with them. He might have powers, but didn't want to risk it. The girl even thinks he's a coward, and pulling a gun from her purse, she said she would explain better about this job. However, the city was being invaded at that moment, and she would show how important this job was. He already imagined he would be killed by her. With a serious look, she told him not to move. That's because actually there was a worm behind him. Sarah was watching the alien invasion closely. A red storm was appearing in the sky. Some people thought they were ghosts, but actually they were beings from another dimension, says Kai. These creatures weren't supernatural, but monsters from a parallel universe, and they seemed to feed only on humans. They charge at our hero, but the girl steps in to protect him, and lands a powerful blow with her purse. He realizes she was really strong, and then fires several shots. It even seemed like those bullets were special. She explains that she doesn't know why the worms are obsessed with our world. but the duty of the nerd organization was to protect humans. And after that explanation, she asks if he wants to join them. Our hero starts screaming in fear, and even tries to run, but she protects him by eliminating the monsters. If she thought that would change his mind, she thought wrong. They kept appearing through the portals, and the girl comments that it's all very strange, since lately they've been showing up in large groups. The worms used to work alone or in pairs, but now they're grouping together because they realize they're stronger that way. She charges at the monster, and with just one stomp, she cracks the entire ground. The boy realized she wasn't just any human. Then the girl explained that her ability was actually kinetic energy amplification, and after hitting with her purse, the entire ground explodes. The girl admits she was scared when she discovered she had powers, and says it's normal for him to feel that way. However, he wasn't going to change his mind, because he wanted a peaceful life. Holding the worm's neck, she thinks he's a real coward, and then finishes off the monster. With a look of disdain, she said it was a shame he wouldn't accept becoming a hero. Since there was no convincing him, she would change strategies. He even wonders what she meant by that. Since he wouldn't join the team, she would abandon him, and leave the guy to be devoured by the worms, because now he was no longer her responsibility. The guy starts screaming in fear, and tries to jump away. However, the worms wouldn't give up on devouring him. In a kind of crazy way, she keeps saying that Ian was doing great, and even took out her phone to record him being attacked. We know this was a strategy to convince him to use his powers, but he really thought he was being left to die. Whispering, she said he would have to learn to fight on his own. At that moment, he realized he was in trouble. The worm was about to bite him, and when it lunged at him, the guy started screaming in desperation. Since she hadn't helped, he thought he really was being left to die, and even asked if she was crazy, because she was just messing with her phone. At that moment, Ian asked her to save him, saying he would accept working with them. Then Kai pulls him out of there, and with a simple push, throws the creatures far away. Since he had given his word, he couldn't go back anymore. With that, she defeated the remaining worms with great ease, and now that he agreed to work at the nerd organization, they would have a barbecue to celebrate. The guy blushed in embarrassment, and realized she was having fun while finishing off the monsters. However, a car is thrown at them, and ends up hitting the girl. The one who did that was a worm that had taken over his costume. Kai even makes a joke saying worms have terrible taste in costumes. Hearing that, the creature gets angry, and after punching, destroys the whole ground. This was a high-level worm, so she grabs a piece of the street to hit it. But that strike didn't do any damage. It only made the monster angrier. She realized she was screwed, and the worm hit her with a powerful punch. She was thrown far away, hit her back against the wall. Ian asked if she was okay. In response, Kai said she wouldn't be able to defeat the creature. The monster seemed really strong, so he would have to defeat it himself. The bear worm starts charging at Ian, but unexpectedly, lightning strikes it, and thus the worm is defeated. The boy thinks he did that, but actually the one who was there to save them was Sarah. Kai celebrates while the boy looks suspicious. The blonde girl said to hurry up, because she doesn't have all day. At that moment, the other worms nearby jumped on her. But Sarah caused a gigantic explosion in that neighborhood, and so the remaining worms ended up fleeing back through the portal in the storm. Kai kept saying that Sarah was amazing while our protagonist looked stunned. She said she couldn't control her powers because she was out of energy, and her friend kept saying she was very humble. Now that the whole city was destroyed, the organization would have to clean up the mess. Sarah heard that he accepted the job and invited him to the barbecue. Seeing the girl's strength, he was sure he wouldn't survive long. They were worse monsters than the worms themselves. He was in a bad mood, even more so seeing that Kai was a cheerful idiot. The scene shifts to the next day. They were having breakfast and got startled by Ian. Sarah asked if he was going to a wedding. That's because the guy was wearing formal clothes. He thought he was from MIB, the Men in Black. They even laughed since they had bet he would show up on the first day dressed like that. So he said he was going to the bathroom to change. Minutes later, he comes back wearing a regular jacket, and even asks if he wasn't supposed to work in an office. Kai goes up to him and starts hugging him, asking if he got a little mad. That shameless guy had blushing cheeks. That's because her eyes were way too close. Looking at the girl's face, he was already melting. He said she was very beautiful. Because of her looks, he didn't even mind that she kept teasing him. Even if she was crazy, she looked like an angel. And he even kept thinking about a bunch of things you can probably guess. With a naughty look, he said he was all hers. The girl gives a confused laugh but thanks him. Sarah, who was playing video games, mumbles that this job isn't a joke. That makes our hero curious. And placing the video game on the table, she said he's a fool. If he thought the agents were heroes, he thought wrong. And she even said people like him are the first to die on this job. He apologizes, saying he won't joke around anymore. In response, she said if he keeps acting like an idiot, he'll die on the first mission. Kai tells her to go easy on the rookie, and the guy goes over there calling her a little kid. At that moment, she throws her ID in his face. Sarah was actually 25 years old. She takes the ID back and he said he didn't believe her. Releasing her power, she told him not to think this job is a fairy tale. If he kept acting like that, he'd only get in their way. In a very bad mood, she flies away from the cafe, and he just watches, not understanding why she was so angry. However, that idea of hers seemed like a lie, but her friend said it was true, just that she wasn't in her original form. That childlike body was due to a side effect. She used too much power trying to protect someone dear, and now that she was out of energy, she ended up with that childish appearance. Miss Kai even says that Sarah is kind of like the leader of the nerd organization. Now that everything was explained, she told him to put the bags in the van so they could go to the office. After a few minutes, they arrive at the building. The boy says it didn't look like a big organization. It was a pretty simple office, to be honest. She said that this job needed a cover, so they rented a simple place. This disguise was really fun, and they only acted when worms appeared in the city. In this fictional job, he would be her assistant, and pointing to a door, she told him to leave the bags there. The guy already starts imagining that this job was going to be boring, and when he opens the door, he finds girls changing clothes. He's no fool, so he takes a peek. Then they start screaming, saying there's a shameless guy in the apartment. Because of the screaming, he gets super embarrassed, not knowing where to hide his face. The scene shifts to Sarah on top of a building. She was regretting taking her frustrations out on the rookie. At that moment, a worm appears on the street nearby, and the girl comments that these creatures are showing up every day. She jumps down. Miss Kai apologizes for her assistant, and even tells the girls that it was all just a misunderstanding. They apologize for beating up the boy, but Kai says not to worry, and she already told them to pose for the photos. The girls ask if he doesn't need to go to the doctor, and Kai says no. Right after the photo shoot begins. This was a dream job for the guy, and the only thing he had to do was hold the equipment. He even imagines this job is a million times better than he thought. It was like he was in heaven, and he even gets a little dizzy. Kai starts giving instructions, and he just obeys. Meanwhile, Sarah is fighting worms. She even said it was annoying having to capture a worm without eliminating it. From a nearby family, some kids appear. They wanted to know what that monster was. In response, Sarah says it was a kind of alien, and the kids keep saying it was really awesome. They even ask the blonde girl if she's like a superhero. In a very serious tone, she says no, that she's not a heroine. Back at the photo shoot, the guy was really enjoying it. And as soon as they finish, the models say goodbye to Ian, leaving the boys super happy. Kai asks if he liked the job, and he said yes, and wanted to know if by any chance he could keep helping her. In a very excited way, he said he'll do his best to become a super agent of nerd. At that moment, a worm jumps on his face, and he gets extremely scared. Even his friend asks what a worm is doing in there. Desperate, he starts dropping the equipment on the floor. Sarah shows up saying Ian was hired to eliminate worms, not to be a photographer. That's why she brought a worm for him to train. Terrified, he keeps telling the monster to let go of him. Kai thinks the boy won't be able to handle it, but suddenly he starts absorbing the creature, and within seconds the worm disappears. Sarah comments that he did it really fast and that the ability was powerful. Giving a smile, Kai says that he will develop much more stability. He will be able to absorb many monsters at once. Out of breath, he said they could at least have warned him. But Sarah doesn't go easy and keeps telling him to stop being a crybaby. This wasn't high school and he needed to be tough. However, he wasn't used to absorbing the creatures, and he ended up feeling nauseous. They say it's normal at the beginning to suffer side effects. And Sarah keeps giggling. It seemed like this girl enjoyed making him suffer. Feeling a little sorry for the boy, she told Sarah they should have some consideration for him. And the little blonde says he needs to stop being so soft. And they agree with that, saying it will be for his own good. The guy thought at least Miss Kai would be on his side. Yeah, my boy. It's just you and God now. Seems like now he had understood. This secret organization called Nerds was made up of people with psychic powers. In other words, it was an organization meant to stop the worms. They weren't superheroes, because they did shady things we'll still see. But what he didn't understand was why he had to live with them. It was obvious that this was just so they could keep an eye on him. The guy was about to refuse to live with them, but when he saw little Kai in pajamas, he changed his mind on the spot. I'm sure even you would accept that. In drooling with love, he didn't even hear what they were saying. Sarah said he was acting like Goofy again, and even asked what he was staring at. The big guy tries to play it cool, saying he wasn't staring at anything, and even said he wouldn't look at her because she looked like a little kid. We see that she doesn't like being called a kid, and after getting shocked, Kai holds her friend back so she won't eliminate the boy. At the end of the night, they were chilling, drinking and talking, and even shared embarrassing stories from their missions. Kai asked Sarah if they didn't make a good choice by hiring Ian. In response, she says his ability isn't that rare, and that everyone with the same power as his ends up dying. Whispering to Ian, the girl says she was just kidding and that deep down she liked him. In a somewhat sad tone, he asks them if he will ever become useful one day, and that he thought he wasn't good at anything because his ability only absorbed things. Kai laughs, saying that his ability is amazing, and while saying that, she already grabs a knife. He could evolve the ability to absorb other things besides worms, and to demonstrate it, she stabs our protagonist in the belly. The guy freaks out, but we see he was absorbing the knife. Sarah tells Kai to take it easy because he could end up dying, and within seconds the knife started to disintegrate, and he managed to absorb it in just a few seconds. This power was amazing, as if he were a magic pouch. That's why he shouldn't feel sad and instead look on the bright side. At that moment, he realized that although she was pretty, Kai was nuts. And they say there had been other devourers on the team, but all of them died. At that moment, Sarah tells Kai to stop bringing up that subject. She didn't want them talking about him. When she was starting to forget that person, her friend would go and bring it up again. At that moment, she ended up sneezing, and saw it was because of a box that was nearby. She quickly pulled off the cloth that was on top. There was a cat hidden inside, along with its kittens, and Sarah got mad at her friend because she knew she was allergic. However, Kai said she couldn't leave the cat outside in the cold. At that moment, the cat started staring at our hero. And right after, it transformed, revealing it was a disguised worm. The kids started calling out to them, saying that cat was actually an alien. The cat worm grabbed one of its kittens to escape, and ran off, abandoning the other kittens behind. Kai said they needed to chase after them, and Sarah says it was Kai who decided to bring that animal into the house, and so she should handle it on her own. The girl started crying, asking for help, and in the end she got on the bike to go after the worm. Our hero started screaming from the back seat, asking her to slow down, but the girl didn't care and just kept speeding up, and even told him to hold on tight. She sped up so much that the kid said he was going to be thrown off. What he wanted to know was why the worm only transformed after seeing our hero. It was probably because it realized he was a devourer. She said devourers cause fear in worms. At that moment, they spot the creature escaping. Miss Kai shouts at the cat to wait. However, it activates hack mode and starts flying. With that, she had no other choice, and had to use her piloting skills. She tells the guy to hold on tight, and of course he wouldn't miss that chance, and does exactly what she said, ends up holding tightly onto her up high. The girl notices that, and he even thinks that this is a romantic chase. Now she could speed up all she wanted. Upon hearing those words, she makes an evil face, and she gets off the bike all angry. The cat climbed up this building. Meanwhile, the protagonist was recovering from the beating he got for putting his hands where they didn't belong. If you think this protagonist did the right thing by holding tight, leave a comment for us. While they were looking for the worm, she said they had a strong obsession. It seemed like they were hooked on the living beings of this world. It wasn't just about humans, but also animals. In other words, Nerd's goal wasn't to exterminate the worms, but to protect the civilians. In punching the wall hard, she said she hates shameless people just like she hates worms. And the guy is already freaking out, thinking he's not getting out of this building alive. At that moment, he tells her to look behind. That's because the cat worm was standing in front of them. The girl smiles, calling out to the kitty. At that moment, Sarah steps outside the apartment, looking for her friends. She looked like she was worried about something, and after a few seconds, she found Kay's bike. However, there was some worm coming after her. This worm was different. It looked more powerful, so much that she couldn't even feel its presence approaching. Back to the kitten, she manages to catch up to it, and she keeps petting it so it could calm down. She explains that some worms aren't aggressive. That's why they weren't required to defeat all the aliens, only the ones that posed risks. At that moment, an earthquake happens and a worm bursts from the ground. Our hero got really scared, and even asks what just happened. We see that the worm that found Sarah had arrived at that place. It seemed like it was totally different from the others. This one had a more intense power. Sarah appears above them. She was a bit hurt and told them to be careful. This worm seemed to be aware, and they should fight seriously. Her friend and the protagonist get worried, asking how she's doing. The worm rises from the ground and they're ready to continue the fight. Sarah tells everyone to move away, because it sets dangerous. Then she starts charging her power, saying she'll kill that worm by herself. The worm waits for the attack. Then she fires a huge burst of energy, making the whole floor explode. The protagonist realizes how strong she is, and Kay starts cheering, saying her friend really is powerful. The protagonist keeps thinking how the tiny girl is so strong, and that she's basically the leader of Nerd. Then the rubble starts to move, and when the dust settles, we see the worm didn't take any damage, and we also see two objects stuck in the ground with electricity coming out of them. Sarah charges another powerful strike, saying this worm is tough, and while preparing the attack, she says she'll turn it into tiny pieces. Then she unleashes her electric wave and discharges everything on the worm, giving it her all. The protagonist gets worried because she's pushing herself too hard, and Kay notices something's wrong. It seemed like none of the attacks were having any effect. Really folks, the worm wasn't taking any damage, and Kay said it's because of those two objects stuck in the ground. Sarah keeps taunting the worm, asking if it's enjoying it, and her friend tells her to stop because it's not working. She's wasting energy for nothing. Sarah gets mad, saying her friend is ruining her fun. While she was distracted, the worm appears above her, ready to attack. Kay jumps in and saves her friend, and narrowly avoids being crushed by that big worm. Kay says she shouldn't keep attacking. Then the worm prepares another strike, and they already think it's the end, and the attack ends up exploding near them, throwing Kay hard against the wall. Ian asks if they're okay, and Sarah realizes that the worm also uses electricity, and Kay reveals that it's probably absorbing Sarah's powers. Those poles are absorbing all the attacks, so it made no sense to keep attacking like that. Sarah says then they should beat it up to death, and Kay says again that electric attacks won't work, they'll have to come up with another way. She tells Sarah to rest, that she'll take care of the creature, and start stretching to get ready for battle. Ian will take care of the kitten while she goes for a one-on-one fight with the worm. Then, without delay, she charges at the creature, landing a powerful knee to the head, and right after, several punches, without the worm being able to react. She keeps hitting him really hard, and the protagonist gets excited, saying he trusts her, but Sarah tells Kay to pay attention, since she's using up a lot of energy, and it's not having much effect. If it keeps going like this, she'll lose strength quickly. Kay will have to try to finish this fight fast, or she won't have a chance to win. Close by we see the worm cat carrying her kittens. A mysterious girl talks to the little creature, asking if by chance it saw two crazy girls. The cat looks in a certain direction, as if indicating where they are. The mysterious girl looks at that building, and realizes something is off, and she says it was pretty easy to find the two of them. Back to the fight, Kay keeps landing several punches on the worm, while the protagonist keeps cheering. She gets distracted by Ian, and ends up taking a really strong hit, but she manages to grab its arm and says it's tough, and that she'll take that arm with her. With a lot of strength, she manages to rip it off, but with the remaining hand, it prepares an attack that hits her and throws her far away. On the ground, Kai asks how she sits doing, and Sarah makes an observation saying that this worm seems to have been created just to fight them, since it's immune to electric attacks, and very resistant to physical attacks. The worm then grabs its torn-off arm and charges at them. Ian gets super scared, asking what they're going to do, and Kay reveals she's out of energy, because she's already very hungry, since she even drank beer. Ian asks if she's serious, and she says she can't move anymore. The girl starts asking for barbecue, and Ian panics, shaking her. When the worm is about to hit them with its own arm, he manages to grab Kay and jump out of there, dodging the attack. He tries to motivate the girl, saying he'll buy her barbecue if she manages to fight again. Then to buy them some time, Sarah starts firing several electric blasts, while throwing insults at the worm. He tells her not to do that, or else it'll keep absorbing, and Sarah says she doesn't have another option. If she doesn't do it, the worm is going to kill Kay. The protagonist remembers those electric posts, and has a brilliant idea. While Sarah keeps electrocuting the worm with her power, she keeps yelling at the protagonist to run away with Kay. For a few seconds he doesn't really know what to do. Fighting the worm wouldn't work. He wondered if he should run or try to help, but he didn't have enough strength to do anything, while his friend was passed out in his arms. Then he thinks maybe his idea could work, so he leaves Kay there and runs off. Sarah wonders what he's doing, and starts cursing, asking why he's trying to run away alone. He says he's not running, and that he's going to try to do something first. He remembers what Kay said earlier, that his absorption power, for now, was limited to absorbing worms, but over time he could absorb anything, so that's what he was determined to do. When he gets to those objects, Kay notices and wonders what he's doing. Then he puts his hands on them, and tries to absorb while taking all the shocks. The electricity running through his body is really strong, and he starts screaming. It didn't work, folks, and he falls to the ground like crap. Sarah keeps yelling at him, saying he's an idiot, that he should have picked up Kay and gotten out of there. Kay was just thinking about food, saying the names of dishes, while her friend tells her to shut up. Then, when everything seemed lost, the worm is suddenly sliced to pieces by a sword, and Sarah is shocked, wondering what happened. Then that mysterious girl appears with her sword, turning the worm into bits. She lands in a really cool way, and the worm disintegrates in the air. Sarah doesn't seem to like her much, and Kay recognizes her right away, and the protagonist is passed out on the floor. The badass-looking girl wonders why there are three of them there. The next day, the protagonist wakes up feeling a bit groggy. He doesn't really know what's going on or where he is. He was in his room in that new house. Kay was drinking coffee a bit farther away. She was distracted and didn't really pay attention to what Sarah said. So she repeats, saying that worm from yesterday was really weird. She said it was more concerned with finishing them off than possessing them. It didn't seem like a normal worm. It wasn't in that energy form, but instead had a shape they'd never seen before. Even the abilities were different. Then she says it seemed to have been created especially to fight them, which shocks Kay since she'd never thought about it that way. Then she starts questioning the whole thing and even goes a bit crazy, saying that now that Miho is back from vacation, they need to have a barbecue. Ian goes to the fridge to get something to eat. He mentions that his hair grew a little and also notices that it's pretty quiet in the house and those psychos aren't there today. The night before, while they were fighting the worm, he remembers having seen a new girl holding a sword. He remembered well the shape of the sword and the symbol engraved on it, but thought it had been a dream. And while he was drinking his juice, he hears the sound of the shower. He finds it strange, since the house was empty. A little farther away, Sarah talks to Kay, asking where Miho is, saying she appeared out of nowhere while still on vacation. Kay said Miho mentioned she came back early because she had something to do, so she was at home resting and must have already met Ian by now. When she hears that Sarah almost falls off her chair, she said they can't leave the two alone and need to go back there. Kay said they're not kids, and Sarah interrupts her, saying it's obvious what Miho wants. Then she runs outside to go to her house to check what's going on. Kay asks if this is serious and watches her friend walk away. At the house, we see Ian opening the bathroom door and coming face to face with Miho. She had a towel wrapped around her head, getting ready to take a shower, and the protagonist doesn't know where to look. She keeps staring at him while he says nothing, just watches. And when he snaps out of it, his nose starts gushing blood everywhere and his eyes nearly pop out. He apologizes and covers his nose, running away from there. The girl says nothing, just keeps laughing, and we see a worm on her shoulder. He runs as far as he can, while a worm chases after him. He wonders who that girl is. Wasn't he alone here? And accidentally notices another worm behind him, watching with a sinister look. He keeps apologizing, then she asks if by chance he is the new intern. He kneels on the floor and swears he didn't see any floral lingerie since his vision is all blurry. He wonders if she's doing this on purpose. Then she gets really close to his face and tells him to lie down. Meanwhile, Sarah and Kay are driving back home, saying their friend is overreacting, that Miho wouldn't do anything stupid. Sarah interrupts, telling her to step on it and hopes it really is just exaggeration. Back at the house, Miho lays the protagonist on the floor and then mounts on top of him, saying he is S-level material. He tries to apologize, but his cheeks turn red and he says the view he has now is the view of paradise. Then we see a bit more about Miho. In this flashback, she fights a giant worm. She was after it because she wanted to make a contract, and that's something we'll explain later. While the worm comes at her with full force, she says he prefers to fight instead of accepting deals. Then with a very serious look, she delivers an extremely powerful blow to the beast and ends up defeating it. She goes to a pond to relax and thinks that worm wasn't S-level material. She was really bored during her vacation, so one of her contracted worms brings her the phone. She had received a message, and when she opens it, she sees there's a new member of the nerd. This new member was an absorber, and she finds that interesting. And because of that, she decides to return to the city and end her vacation early. Back to that moment where she was on top of Ian, she says she can't believe there's another material like him in the nerd. He doesn't know what to say, just starts sweating cold with red cheeks. Still on top of him, she says it's because of opportunities like this that she can't leave the organization, and ends up asking him to tell her how he activated his abilities, and if by chance he had already activated the secondary one. He asks what she's talking about, kind of shocked, and she mumbles saying she thinks he hasn't activated it yet, and that it's a shame, so it would be better to make a contract after he's activated it. He wonders what she's talking about. He really didn't understand anything. She explains that if she makes the contract with him now, they won't know when he'll go through the second activation, but she also doesn't want to wait. The girl just mumbled and didn't listen to anything he was saying. The protagonist already starts thinking nonsense. The girl says she's going to begin. She will induce the second activation in him, and this could be dangerous, but they could make a contract after that. Then she starts using some kind of power and a smoke starts coming out of her hand. She says it's the first time she's doing this alone, but she's sure it will work. She tells him not to worry and not to be scared, because it will be quick. Then she puts her hand inside Ian's belly, and a really strong worm starts coming out of there. He screams in pain, asking what the heck she's doing, but she keeps going and repeats several times that it'll be over soon, and he doesn't need to worry. He screams even more in pain, wondering how she managed to stick her hand into his belly. Then he grabs her tightly and pushes her away, making the girl fall to the ground. He gets mad, saying he thought he was going to die. Miho says it's a waste, because she was already finishing up. The girl stays there on the ground, while Jiho yells all sorts of names at her, extremely furious. The worms start to surround them, and he keeps wondering where so many worms came from. The girl says they are friends and have a contract with her. These worms are S-level spirits. The girl explains that she is a summoner and had made the contract so they would help her. Then she stretches her hand and leans on Ian in a very sensual way. She asks if he will be her friend, and I doubt any of you here could resist this girl's seduction. She stares into his eyes, and the protagonist has to try really hard not to look down. She asks if by any chance he's nervous and says that the only thing she wants is to become his friend. He notices that the worms are getting closer and starts screaming. He's so scared that he shuts his eyes tight, and before he knows it, he's in another place, as if it were another dimension. His head is confused, he doesn't really know what's happening, but at that moment, a strong lightning blast appears and explodes the place where the two were, launching Miho and Ian far away. He lands half unconscious, and the other girl there is furious, looking at Sarah and Kay. Half dazed, Ian calls out Kay's name because he's in love, and she asks if he's okay. Sarah mentions he found it suspicious that Miho had given up on her vacation and come back so early, and asks if she was abusing the boy. Miho gives a very serious look, and Sarah asks again what she was doing with Ian, while the boy lies confused on the ground. Sarah mentions that Miho was trying to do the same thing she did to her. She just wants to turn the person into a little pet and add to her collection. Kei doesn't believe it and says she couldn't do that to a team member, and Miho replies that they are really noisy. Then she says she only accepted the nerd recruitment with one condition: she could make contracts with S-level materials whenever she wanted. And that didn't apply only to Sarah, so she said it didn't make any difference whether he was a team member or not. Sarah says she's very mistaken and that she won't let her do whatever she wants, then begins charging an electric attack. She tells Miho to try it again if she dares, and Miho says it's touching of her, but that she won't hold back. The mysterious girl summons a large birdworm, and a very exciting fight is about to begin. The house would probably be completely destroyed. She said today is her lucky day because she'll get 2 S-level materials in one single day, and just as the fight is about to start, Miho gets hit on the head with a frying pan. Everyone stares at the scene, unsure if it worked or not. Sarah gets mad, saying the fun was just about to begin. Then Kei says they should turn her into Jiho and starts laughing. The two had already exchanged greetings and looked like they were about to fight for real, so she couldn't let her partner remain as Miho. Sarah mentions that's why she said the fun was about to begin and ends up feeling bored. The girl, with a headache, starts complaining. When she realizes where she is, we see her expression is different. She greets Sarah and Kai and shyly asks if Miho caused trouble again, with a very cute face. The question crosses your mind, how can none of the nerd members be normal? So they decide to have dinner. During the meal there were several tasty dishes, and Jiho, now with the new personality, is happily eating everything. She keeps saying it's delicious, and everyone else looks bored. Then Ian asks if he got it right. She was possessed by a worm, but thanks to her abilities, her soul wasn't completely eaten, and that's why she survived. But now she's coexisting in the same body with the worm, so she has a split personality. The worm version is called Miho, and the human part is called Jiho. Then the girl says he's right, she was the original owner of the body. Miho is the personality that controls the worm, and both are very different. Then the girl asks everyone to get along with her other personality. Sarah says she should have been completely devoured, and the poor thing agrees. Ian says that if Miho tries to devour him again, she should stop her. Then Jiho says she can't do anything, since they don't share memories. She wouldn't even know or remember anything, and apologizes saying he's on his own with that. Sarah says her ability is annoying. Kai mentions she has to chase after her every time, and Jiho asks her to be gentle, since it's her who'll feel the pain. While they talk, the protagonist realizes nobody cares about him. Final part, guys, the new arc. The 3 extremely powerful electric users. This was Sarah Park, an S-level agent who uses powerful electric abilities. Kai, highly skilled with multiple weapons and military equipment, has the ability to amplify kinetic energy, swords, and contracts with worms. Miho, a summoner with a split personality, skilled in spells and swordsmanship. And finally Ian, an absorber capable of absorbing anything, with infinite potential. These were the guardian agents of the psychic organization NERD, a secret agency. And this is what the idiot protagonist keeps thinking. But nobody cares about him and he's badly treated by everyone. They leave him to carry the bags. He takes them to the car and apologizes. Kai asks for the address, and the protagonist gets extremely excited, all because the day before he had mentioned the photo shoot session with the girls. Summer was coming and they would have to sell new products. Sarah keeps complaining, saying that Nerd's salary is very good, so they didn't need to keep pretending with another job. Kai insists, saying they have to give their best, and Sarah asks if they really need that disguise. Jiho says she just got back from vacation, so she's not really in the mood to work. Then Kai mentions that the models had open schedules and that they would waste this chance. Then Sarah starts laughing, saying to call and cancel the photo shoot. Those 2 models were very photogenic, had beautiful bodies, and it would be a shame to cancel. Since the vote was 2 against 1, she ends up giving in and says she'll call to cancel. At that moment, the simp protagonist appears and says he won't cancel anything. The disguise was essential to avoid national confusion, and he said they need to give their best in that photo shoot. You can already imagine why, right? No need for details. He says that in other words, they need to make that photo shoot a priority. The disguise was crucial to save civilians' lives. Sarah says she was suspicious. That excuse doesn't work. She knows what he wants, and Jiho ends up saying she'll change her vote to yes, making it 3 against 1. The protagonist jumps with joy, and the models end up confirming the photo shoot. Going to the location, Ian gets very excited, thinking about how wonderful it will be. They go to a mansion to do the photo shoots, and everyone there is amazed by the house. Kai asks if, by any chance, Sarah had already been there, and says that mansion is where nerd agents have parties. The protagonist keeps asking where the models are. Sarah keeps looking closely at that place. Then she remembers something, a scene, right? But she tells us that this gift was from her mother, and a girl thanks her with a pendant on her wrist, saying she'll return it on her birthday. So Sarah remembers this and gets nervous, wondering why she has to do the photo shoot in that exact place. They are all excited back there, and the protagonist asks for the 50th time where the models are. That place brought certain kinds of memories to Sarah. She had made a promise with a girl named Nicole that they wanted to come back there together. Moments later, Ian gets the news that the model's car crashed and they were in the hospital. Kai keeps saying she hopes they weren't seriously hurt, and Ian, since he just wanted to do his job right, of course, keeps asking about the photo shoot and what they were going to do. Sarah says that now that the models aren't coming, they can just go home. Jiho tries to cheer the boy up, telling him not to be upset. He says his life is crap. Then Sarah says the disguise business should be a coffee shop and not a lingerie store because the clothes make everything harder. Sarah tells him to pack the bags so they can leave, but Kai insists on continuing with the photo shoot. She says they still have models and can start shooting. Sarah laughs, asking where they'll find a replacement so quickly. Then Kai tells her to get ready with that deadly look, and Sarah already knows what she means. With a serious look, she pressures the girls to get changed. Then we see the girls with their legs showing, with the proper look for taking pictures. Kai mentions that the bikini is a bit tight. That's because it was the model's size. The protagonist asks why the hell there's one that fits her, and Jiho celebrates because hers fit perfectly. Then seeing all of them wearing swimsuits, Jiho says the clothes are very pretty. Sarah complains, saying she hates all of this, and Kai wonders if she gained some weight. The shameless protagonist is there celebrating a lot, and so they start posing for the pictures, advertising the clothes. Kai took several pictures saying they were coming out beautiful, and the shameless Ian was taking advantage. Then she handed the camera to the boy saying it was his turn to take the photos, and she went there to model. The guy was drooling, saying she was very beautiful. It was impossible not to fall in love with her. That was being the best day of his life. He even cried with emotion, thanking for that job. After that, he kept looking at the photos he took, and the girls said they turned out better than they imagined. Now it was Sarah's turn, and she even started trembling from nervousness. Kai tells her to give a really nice smile, and when they go to take the photo, she has a grumpy face. Everyone keeps telling her not to do that, and that it would be good for business if she made a friendlier face. So they were going to try again, and she makes a horrifying smile. Hours later, they comment that they were tired of taking so many photos. They wanted to rest and then do another session. And our protagonist was already imagining them with a new set of outfits and getting super emotional. He even starts saying he'll learn new photography techniques. Sarah says she's not taking any more pictures, and they keep insisting choosing the clothes for her to wear. That would be too humiliating, she says. But our hero insists that she should smile for the pictures. Then the girl fires a lightning bolt that passes right by him, and blows up the entire background. We see that she doesn't like taking photos at all, and says that if they insist, she won't miss the next bolt. And he realizes that she is very dangerous. With a more serious face, she repeats, saying she's not going to take any damn pictures. Jiho asks why she was so scared like that, and that startles the little blonde, telling the girl not to get so close. They keep insisting, saying she would look really pretty in pool clothes, but she tells them to stop saying that because she's embarrassed. Miss Kai says she shouldn't be so stubborn, and so everyone starts pressuring her, saying it's very important for her to appear in the photos. Seeing that everyone was being annoying, she starts releasing her lightning energy. Everyone gets a huge shock, and after they were stunned, she says she doesn't like people messing with her, and flies far away. Our hero was still unconscious, and Kai says they need to take the photo quickly because it's already getting dark. Normally Sarah wasn't that short-tempered, so something was going on, and our protagonist even asks how they put up with being treated like that. In response, she says Sarah wasn't always hot-headed like that. At that moment, we see Jiho transformed into Miho, and the two get scared. She actually wanted to make a contract with Ian, and looks at him with an evil face. She said Sarah was annoying but also useful from time to time. And now that Sarah was gone, she would finalize the contract with Ian. She's already pulling her sword out of the bag, and said that while she's unconscious inside Jiho's body, she watches everything that's happening. Our hero already starts freaking out. And now they're sure she wasn't their companion, but the worm inside her, Miho. She waves at Ian, saying it's a pleasure to meet him again. Since she was super powerful, they knew they wouldn't be able to stop her. The girl asks to continue the contract, and Miss Kai tells her to stop with that joke. However, she wasn't joking, and seriously wanted to seal that contract. At an astonishing speed, she approaches our hero, and said she only agreed to join Nerd because he promised to let her make contracts with S-Class materials. However, he said he couldn't accept. Miss Kai appears with a chair behind her, intending to knock her out, and was about to hit her, like she did last time. The scene changes to Sarah near a tree where she had been 8 years ago. She remembers her companion and the promise they made to return there together. Sarah said that her friend was an idiot because they wouldn't keep that promise. At that moment, someone appears behind the girl, saying he would recognize her from afar. A blue sphere appears right behind, scaring Sarah. Someone comes out of it, saying he couldn't imagine he'd find Sarah in child form. It seems she knows this person, and he asks if that form of hers is some kind of side effect. At that moment, she already gets angry, calling him every name in the book. He said it's been 8 years since they met, back during the second wave, and even said it's a pleasure to see her again. His name was Grant Seo, and releasing lightning, she asks what he's doing there. The explosion of her powers is gigantic. Back at the house, at the pool, Kai was trapped by a worm. Miho did that to get her out of the way while she made the contract with Ian. The girl asks to be freed and says she won't do anything, that she'll stay quiet. Besides, they were friends and Miho couldn't do something so mean to her. Miho mocks her, saying they're not friends at all, and that Kai is so weak she can't even get rid of B, who was a pretty weak worm. And so they start arguing. Turning on all her charm, the girl tries to convince Ian to seal a contract with her, and even said she could satisfy all his desires. Look at the face that woman makes, you can already imagine what she means. The boy feels tempted to accept, then she uses a spell to trap him. It had been a long time since she'd sealed a pact with an S-class, so she was very excited. Raising her hands, she summons a worm. At that moment, he starts calling for help from Miss Kai. But the girl was trapped by the worm B. A prison worm surrounds Ian. He kept calling for help, but Miho said it was too late. And on top of that, Kai was weak and couldn't get rid of a low-level worm. Actually, Miss Kai was sad, because she always thought they were friends, and watches her new companion sealing a contract. That only makes her furious. And she releases her energy, breaking free from the worm. Then she apologizes to Miho, and lands a powerful hit on the girl, throwing her into the pool. And even tells Ian to run. She would hold Miho off until Sarah arrived. However, she couldn't fight that girl, so she starts running away with our hero. The woman climbs out of the pool, and says she didn't imagine Kai would be that strong. On the other hand, the little blonde was fighting Grant. The place she hit with the lightning was destroyed. But the guy appears behind her, saying the girl's attitude hasn't changed at all. At that instant, she fires another lightning bolt, and the guy laughs evilly. And after opening a portal, all of the girl's energy gets absorbed. He was also a devourer, and the girl's attacks wouldn't affect him. And he keeps provoking her, saying that aggressiveness is part of her charm and that he liked that. Sarah starts cursing him. Then he asks if by chance she wasn't being a little too harsh with a former teammate. Charging her power, she says he was never part of her team. Admitting he felt remorse for what he did, he said he just came to greet her and that he wouldn't apologize. That once his work started, he would meet with her more often. The girl already gets worried, asking what the hell he's plotting, and he starts laughing, and still says she has no right to complain about anything because of everything she did. He even asks if she's going to do the same to the new employee, which embarrasses her. We see this new employee who was hiding with Kai inside the van. He was enjoying it, saying she was pretty tight with him, and the girl gives a little excuse saying the van was cramped. That's just an excuse to stay close to our hero. He even comments that it could take as long as needed for Miho to find them. She steps on the roof, and starts walking slowly over the car looking for them. She even thinks they're very good at hiding. Kai thinks the coast is clear and they could escape. And again, this shameless guy keeps saying he doesn't mind being locked in the van with this beautiful girl. He could even stay there for hours. At that moment, he's surprised by a sword piercing the car. Miho says she almost left, and that all this time they were hiding right under her nose. Pointing her face at the window, she said she wouldn't let the boy escape her, and that they should finish what they had already started. Jumping out of the car, they start fleeing desperately. With an evil smile, she said he won't escape her, and she starts summoning other worms to catch them. The monsters jump on our hero, and manage to bite him, and drag him to Miho. He even calls for help from Miss Kai, and this capture was easier than Miho thought. It was being handed right to her. However, Kai wouldn't let it happen so easily, and she already jumps toward the girl, preparing a powerful attack. She destroys that worm with her palms, and frees our protagonist. The girl falls to the ground and the worms melt around her. Then she would use another attack like that to push Miho away. She launches a sphere of energy, destroying the remaining worms. That power was very strong, and the woman seems surprised by that attack. Hitting the van, a big explosion destroys everything. We see that Miss Kai was quite powerful. And look at where this shameless guy was looking. He thought it was over, but the girl says it didn't even scratch Miho. If it was that easy to defeat her, they wouldn't be running away. It seems she blocked that power with her blades. They could only buy time until Sarah arrived. Miho says Kai is stronger than she thought and admits it. But there was a catch. She considered Kai her friend and for that reason was trying to hold back. Then she asks why she's so interested in protecting that scared boy. Back to Grant, he says Nerd isn't the same as before, and even asks why that nobody was hired by them. That only meant he would be used because of his power and soon after discarded. That's what Nerd did with its employees. Sarah tells him to shut up and that he was the one who betrayed Nerd. He wouldn't argue because he came for another reason today. And with a smile, he said he had a proposal for her, and immediately starts summoning those worms that attacked her at the building. He asks her to abandon Nerd and come work for him, since he was on the right side. Seeing those creatures, she knows he created them to fight her. Back to our protagonist, he was saying he didn't need to be saved because he was just a simple employee. The girl listens to that, and confirms saying he's actually just a loser. She jumps off the car saying it's better to seal a contract with her, and even gives a friendly smile trying to convince him. However, Miss Kai wouldn't let it happen so easily. The two start fighting again to protect the boy, and she says she'll defend him no matter what because he's her companion. All this time he survived just doing odd jobs that paid little. He was ashamed to approach women because of that humiliating work, but now he was in a completely different position. He had 2 women fighting over him, and even gets a little dazed, saying he's finally being recognized. However, Kai felt sorry but would use full power, and starts pressing Meho with her attacks. It was enough to make her unconscious so Jiho could take back control of the body. The attack was very strong, and launched the girl hard against the van, which was already destroyed. She wouldn't let Ian become the girl's familiar, because it was like he'd turn into a pet. Leaning on her sword, Miho said she would stop joking. Now she would take the fight more seriously, and already releases a burst of energy with her sword. The girl manages to dodge, and that power cuts through everything in front. If it hit her, the girl would cease to exist instantly, and she even starts to crap herself, because Miho was very powerful. It seems the girl didn't want to do this to her friend, but it would be necessary, and that's because she was interfering with her contract. And so she summons a gigantic worm. The fight was getting serious, and those snakes start attacking the girl. She was managing to dodge, but ended up surrounded, so she had to block with her fists. Miho starts provoking Kai, and launching a new wave of worms. Asks if the girl was in love with Ian. Kai wouldn't fall for her provocations, and slamming her hand on the ground, she causes an explosion to defend herself from that attack. The worms start burning, and she knew she couldn't handle someone at Miho's level, so she hoped Sarah would arrive soon. The boy stays in the back, saying he'll pay for a barbecue when all this is over, but the girl doesn't give up and rushes forward with her sword in hand, and in a serious tone says this game ends now. The big boy gets worried, shouting for Kai to get out of there, and so she ends up receiving several cuts. The fight was over. Grant says his proposal is real, and she should join him. Quite surprised, she asks how he can summon the worms. However, these creatures weren't normal. They were artificial worms, and he made each one of them. Besides everything, the worms follow his orders, and so he orders them to attack the girl. She charges an electric shock, but he says that won't work. We've seen this before, those bars suck electric energy, and were made to fight exactly against Sarah. Since she was one of the people he'd have to face, he ended up creating something strong against her. The monster approaches the girl. Kai was unconscious on the ground, and now the boy would be in trouble. He shouts asking if she's okay, and Miho watches the whole scene. Miss Kai wasn't dead, and only made an attack to make her faint. Very angry, he said that woman was a lunatic. But before Miho could finish the contract, Kai gets up. She wouldn't let anyone touch her companion, and she also said that after all this ends, she'd have barbecue with him. The scene shifts to a flashback with Kai and Grant. She was teasing him, saying that if he kept being so slow they wouldn't finish the job. They were looking for a worm that escaped. The guy asks if she shouldn't be at school at this time, and she said no, and that if he kept changing the subject, she'd tell Sarah he likes her. And at that moment he uses his power to absorb the worm, and still jokes, saying he's working hard to impress the boss. His power was very overpowered, and he managed to absorb the creature completely. The girl asks why he doesn't just confess to Sarah, and that she'll still root for them to become a couple. At that moment Sarah appears asking what they're talking about. She looks like a teenager because that was over 8 years ago, and she wanted to know what they were saying. Kai gets embarrassed because they were talking about her. Right after, she asks why they weren't replying to messages, and that they should keep an eye on their phones. Very excited, Kai prepares to tell the secret about her friend, but then Grant covers her mouth, stopping her from saying he likes Sarah. The blonde girl gives them the biggest scolding. She also says that besides not replying to messages, they were late for the mission, and that if they mess up the group's performance she'll finish both of them. Right after, they agree to eat something, and the guy gets all romantic, saying he likes her explosive way, but now in the present he was using his worms to attack her. So far we don't know exactly what Sarah did to him, but it seems the guy got resentful. The worm appears behind the girl, and she prepares a powerful attack, and throws them away with her shockwave. The guy laughs, saying she's really amazing. However, the electric attacks wouldn't cause damage because of the magnetic poles he created. He had always wondered why she had the title Nerd Witch, and it was because of her abilities. But now he created monsters strong against her. And to provoke her even more, he said that if she stays this weak, she'll never save Nicole. It seems he hit Sarah's weak spot, and she curses, saying he made her remember something she was already forgetting. She remembered why she should kill him, and releasing her power, she said she wouldn't allow him to use Nicole's name in vain, and charges at him, saying it's all that bastard's fault. She releases a gigantic lightning wave. However, this attack wouldn't work because of the magnetic poles, but she didn't want to hit him. Instead, she hit the tree next to him. He realizes she was very clever, but assures it won't work because he's a devourer. Sarah asks if he keeps barking, and so the giant tree starts falling on them. And when it falls, it destroys everything around. Over at the pool, Miho couldn't believe Kai was still awake. She said she wouldn't give Ian to her, which makes us think she likes the boy. He starts crying with emotion, and even imagines that Miss Kai is in love with him since he's so far away. Not really. If she kept fighting, she'd be seriously injured. and he already starts blaming himself for being a coward and not being able to protect the girl he likes. At that moment, he starts to get desperate, thinking of an alternative to save her. However, he still didn't have control of his power, and the only thing he could do was hold the enemy. And he does that, grabbing Miho in his arms, telling Kai to strike and make her faint. That embarrasses Miho, and Kai seems to get jealous. The shameless one was taking advantage of the situation. The scene goes back to the flashback where Sarah was with Nicole under that gigantic tree. Nicole jokes, saying she's going to plant that tree at her house. In response, Sarah says she'll help her do it. However, now in the present, she had been knocked down from that tree. She apologizes for not being able to keep the promise. Grant reappears from inside his portal and says Sarah was very clever for using the tree to destroy the magnetic poles. However, his worms wouldn't be defeated by that. Sarah knew that, since those monsters were also made to endure physical force, as they would also fight Kai. And that's why she wouldn't have a chance to beat him. She says at first she wasn't sure, but now he just confirmed her suspicions. She strikes the ground around those worms with her lightning, and little by little creates a barrier around them. Since they would be absorbing her energy, she wouldn't have to fight them. She just needed to trap them in one place, as they were only a distraction. And after launching that energy barrier, they get trapped. The guy laughs, saying she's very clever and realized it quickly. At that moment, she appears, striking full force, and he dodges at the last second. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking he's the good guy. She said she would show why everyone calls her a witch, and with that she starts summoning lightning to chase him. Opening portals, he says those attacks don't work and begins to drain energy. However, that lightning was just a distraction, and she moves in to hit him, preparing a point-blank attack. He ends up taking a shock, and falling to the ground, says that was impressive. He didn't believe she could have so many strategies to confuse him. However, he was invincible, because as soon as he was out of danger, he just had to run, and that's what he was going to do. The blonde said she wouldn't let him go, but it was too late. He escapes. At that moment, he throws a bracelet out of the portal. Sarah picks up the item, and it was the bracelet she gave to Nicole. She asks how he got that, and he says he went to another dimension after the incident. When he arrived there, he found the pendant lying on the ground, and that's when he realized something. He realized he had made a stupid choice and that Nicole was still alive. That surprises Sarah. However, she wasn't in a condition he could bring back. Desperate, she asks if Nicole is trapped in another dimension, but he wouldn't tell the whole truth. She even gets hit again with an attack, and Grant tells her to consider the proposal to work together. Thus, the lightning hits the ground. The guy leaves without giving more details, and that made Sarah start crying. One wonders if Nicole was her sister, and that's why she had been so moody these days, because she missed Nicole. Back to the fight, Miho sighs, and says it's obvious that this boy is just trying to take advantage of her. However, he tells Kai to hit her already. Then, the sword girl says she will make a proposal. If he accepts to become her familiar, she will let him hug her as much as he wants. And that was a good offer. Kai listens to her, saying she'll make him happy every day, staying cuddled up. And that makes the girl jealous. We're sure she likes our hero, because she was not happy seeing that scene at all. He realizes Kai is coming closer, so he has to dodge not to get hit. The punch hits the sword, throwing it away. He even comments that he's doing well and that he'd need to make Miho faint. However, Kai wasn't aiming at the enemy but at him. And the guy has to crouch to avoid a punch in the face. Yeah, my friend, she really likes you. Look at that angry face on the girl. She even rips off a huge piece of rock to attack him. And the guy runs away, carrying Miho in his arms. This was getting really boring. And in a very simple way, she swings her body and throws our protagonist far away. She was so strong he couldn't even hold on. And she still says she will trap him so he doesn't cause trouble, and starts summoning a worm to trap him. The creature grabs his arms. He hangs in the sky, begging to be freed. Kai realizes this is her chance, since he was off guard, paying attention to something else. However, Miho turns around, and she realizes her enemy had not lowered her guard at all, and even jumps back, afraid of being hit. That look was evil, and our hero shouts for her to be careful because something is coming from above. They were some energy blades. Miho laughs, saying they don't stand a chance and should give up. Those blades hit hard, causing an explosion. She didn't even know where this girl was getting so many techniques from. But to her surprise, another blade came from the side and hit her right in the stomach. It seemed like she was lost now. Miho said she finally caught her. That blow caused a lot of damage, and she fell to the ground, powerless. Her power level wasn't enough. However, that technique didn't work. Miho already starts preparing another attack, saying her friend is very resistant to phantom blades, and to avoid killing her, she will give her one more chance. She just had to promise not to interfere with the contract. She starts begging Miho not to do that since they were teammates. However, with mockery, she asks if that was a joke and even says she has a very important reason to make this contract. And whatever the negotiation, she wouldn't change her mind. However, our hero was yelling up there. He said that crazy woman was going too far. However, it was time to put Kai to sleep, and he throws energy stakes at her. The boy screams for her to stop, but it was too late. Those energy stakes hit the girl. Now it was certain she wouldn't get up anymore. That would leave her unconscious for quite a while. Our hero said she had gone crazy. In her defense, she said she was going easy on Kai, and it was Kai who asked for it, and launched another wave of energy again. Because the girl was very resistant, she had to make sure she wouldn't wake up anymore. And finally she finished with a big explosion. She approaches Kai. Above them, Ian asks if his friend is okay. The girl was unconscious on the ground, and that crazy one keeps kicking her to check if she was really unconscious. Meanwhile, the boy keeps screaming desperately, thinking she had died. Finally, they would have peace to make the deal. Because of his screams, Miho told him to shut up, that he was very annoying. Now she would confirm the agreement and stop all this nonsense. But something ends up stopping her. It was the beauty holding her friend's legs, saying she shouldn't do that. It was all Ian's fault, who was a real coward. He even kicked the worm to free himself, but it didn't help at all. And because of the irritation, Miho said she wouldn't go easy anymore. She ended up blowing up the place where Kai was, saying she was done joking. Poor Miss Kai flew away, hitting her head hard on a rock. She really tried not to be harsh, but she had no choice. Ian knew that if the fight kept going like that, the girl he liked would end up losing her life. And all that because he was useless and didn't even know how to use his power. Even if he tried to use absorption, he couldn't. However, he managed to activate a portal that gradually absorbed the worm. His ability had activated, and with that, he ends up falling hard to the ground. He would have to hurry. Since Miho really wanted to eliminate Miss Kai, even if they were close, she wouldn't accept her being a pain in her side. She felt sorry for having to do that, she said. But this was a goodbye. Our protagonist manages to get in front, and with a furious eye, he activates his absorption portal. He starts absorbing all that power that had been unleashed. And that surprises the girl. Moreover, his hair was changing color, getting a whitish appearance. After absorbing all the power, he says he thought Miho was on their side, and that if it was to put an end to all this, he agreed to become her familiar. It was surprising that he was managing to do that, because he wasn't absorbing it directly into his body but through a portal, and he ended up doing that with all his spiritual swords. If it was to make the girl give up, he accepted and affirmed the contract with her, and that to save the girl he liked. All this scene makes Miho thoughtful. Kai starts regaining consciousness. And meanwhile, he starts feeling sick because of the side effects of his power. The girl realized he managed to awaken on his own without any training. And the most interesting thing was his motivation to do that. He had decided to become a familiar by himself, to protect Kai. At that moment, she remembers something, and sees a creature near a girl, which makes us think that it's Miho with Jaiho. But that's not certain, guys, it's just my theory. She smiles, saying that in the end they're quite similar. Our hero was there, all worried about the girl he liked. And she said he shouldn't accept that, because he could only leave when Miho summoned him. But smiling, he said that was not a problem because he was going to protect someone important. With tears in her eyes, she hears him say he managed to make the most of the last few weeks. And that thanks to her, he got a job and became a full-time employee. He wanted to be crying, but his farewell had to be epic. Bravely, he said he was ready to make the contract. The girl gets thoughtful and ends up raising her hand. She does that to summon new phantom swords above him, and all of them are thrown in his direction, destroying the whole place. He gets thoughtful, wondering if she missed the attack, and those swords were very close to him. She said she wanted to find out what kind of material he was first, before turning him into her familiar, and that's why they would postpone the contract. The guy asks if she's serious, and already turns into a puppy, saying he'll do everything she wants. At that moment, Sarah arrives and asks why he is humiliating himself like that. And moreover, his hair looked strange, and she said it looked funny. He explains to Sarah that that crazy woman hit him and Kai. Upon hearing that, Sarah gets furious, and goes over to ask if her friend was okay. And we see that our protagonist here is just like Kazuma. Think of a sly kid. Kai says it was nothing, and she wasn't even hurt. However, Sarah couldn't allow anyone to hit her friends, and tells Miho that it's enough for today. In her defense, she said she wouldn't try to justify her actions, and that she would accept any consequences for her acts. However, Kai holds Sarah's hand, and tells her to stop, that there was no need to hurt Miho. We see that this girl really cares about her friends, and keeps begging Sarah not to hurt her. In response, the blonde said that one wasn't even one of them, that she was just a worm possessing Jaiho's body, and even asks what that fool was doing standing there all the time. Very worried, he runs off to help the love of his life get up, and even thanks her for worrying about him, and the girl gets embarrassed. Now that everything is settled, he had something important to ask. He wanted to know when they would continue the bikini photo session. We see this guy here doesn't learn, and up above there was a drone spying on them. And the drone seemed to be recording what they were saying. Down below, Kai was strangling the boy, saying he was shameless. After a while, he was getting a little better at his absorption techniques, and tries to do it by absorbing a teddy bear. He starts to mess up that toy, and little by little manages to absorb it completely. Looking at his hands, he said the rate was 10 to 7. Out of every 10 attempts, he succeeded 7 times, and still tried to find out why his hair had turned white that day. Back at the company headquarters, they comment that they need to put new photos on the website. Those photos promoting the clothes weren't enough. And they were even going through a financial crisis. That was a pain because they would have to take new photos and Sarah wouldn't like that. She comments that it's tiring to work with people who don't cooperate, and our hero agrees. He already grabs an outfit, telling them to put it on because he's gonna take the photos. Sarah said she had already made an effort that day and even smiled to help. The summer season had already started and they were losing money. And the guy kept insisting that she put on the bikini to take the photos. Because of that, she started hitting him, saying he was very shameless. At that moment, a woman arrives at the place, and even said it had been a long time since she'd been there. That was Miss Florentina. Kai asked why she didn't call before showing up, and Florentina said to them that she just came to say hello, and that she would take this opportunity to talk about business. She was the former leader of Nerds Division. She asks who the new employee was, and our hero says it's him. As a gift, she would use her powers of seeing the future and reveal his destiny. The girl explains to our protagonist that her power is to make predictions, and after seeing the boy's future she gets angry, and even says he's very shameless, and that if they do anything to Sarah, she will kill him. In response, the blonde tells her not to predict things that would never happen. Whispering very softly, Kai said she gets 99% of her predictions right, and they're only things that will happen in 10 years. Sarah asks what Florinda came to do here today, and says she knows very well that she wasn't just passing through. Everyone gets apprehensive. That's because she is one of the founders of Nerd and employee number 2. Taking her little pet, she said she has something to say, and that's why she would get straight to the point. Lately, they have been destroying the city a lot and causing many losses for Nerd. If they keep going like this, the organization would have to close its doors. And moreover, they didn't act as a team. They had a leader who didn't care about the group, a manager who couldn't manage her teammates, a member who tried to hurt her own colleagues, and a new employee who only thought about bikinis. The main problem was teamwork. If they kept going like this, they wouldn't survive the next wave, since this team wasn't trustworthy. If they continue this way, this nerd division would be disbanded. This wasn't a prediction with her powers, it was a fact. If they don't improve, everyone would lose their jobs. Our hero already gets worried because this was his dream job, and Sarah even asks what she was talking about. He says it's not possible that such a well-established company with government help would be disbanded, and he even gets angry saying he fought hard to work there, and she keeps insisting, telling him to say goodbye to the pretty companies. Kai asked what would happen to the worms if Nerd got disbanded. In response, Florinda said that Nerd wasn't the only organization fighting worms in the world. All the heroes with powers fought against these worms spread across the earth. They were not the last cookie in the jar. Miho said she could very well fight the worms without the organization's help. That was the problem. They had no teamwork. They just needed to improve that because their credibility was falling. If their credibility was so bad, the government wouldn't support them. This makes Sarah angry, saying the government abandoned them during the collapse and they couldn't complain. Besides, the only reason she was still in Nerd was because they promised to bring Nicole back. Florinda asks her employee to show something they had prepared. He plays a video on his phone and shows them Sarah talking to someone. In the video, she had met with Grant CO, and they were talking about Nicole. It was that drone in the sky that had filmed all this. She said she couldn't trust an employee who found an enemy and didn't report it to her superiors. Kai asks Sarah if that was true, if she really had met Grant. Florinda said they saw in that video that it really happened. Sarah was prioritizing something personal over the performance of her own team. At that moment, we see a little blonde girl and another with blue hair knocking on someone's door, who comes out as Grant CO himself, and he asks what those girls want. They call him Sir, and the guy scolds them, saying he's not that old, and still asks what they want. The little girls start whispering to each other, saying he seems dangerous. In response, he says he's hearing everything they're saying. The blue-haired girl asks if he by chance saw a black cat passing in the hallway. That cat was theirs and had run away from home. He just keeps staring at the two, and the blonde girl tells her friend the cat probably isn't there. However, the guy brings the kitten to them and says it was meowing at the door, so he let it in. They thank him, saying he's very kind. As soon as they leave, he comments that the two look like Sarah and Kai. When he returns inside his room, we see it was full of capsules with worms inside. He comments that those worms make a lot of noise, and he's going to have to leave this apartment so as not to attract attention. Back at the office, Ian was worried. They were saying that this Grant guy was very dangerous, and he didn't even know who he was. Florinda had already retired, so she only worked as a mediator between Nerd and the government. Her advice was that they all become a team and work together. Grant would be a problem, but she trusted they could handle it. Sarah starts releasing energy through her hand and was irritated because they used drones to spy on her, and even comments that she will pay a special visit to Nerd's HQ. Miho didn't like being spied on either and says she will go with Sarah to confront them. The employee along with Florinda gets scared, and even imagines that these crazies are very hard to convince. Meanwhile, that shameless guy only thought about losing this dream job. The guy really didn't think about anything else. Kai tells them to calm down and not act impulsively. They needed to first hear what they had to say before going there to cause trouble. However, the two say it's better to go to HQ and confront them. But Kai gets angry and starts releasing her power, and even says they should stop joking around and not act like children. Everyone gets scared. Then they end up asking Florinda why the government has neglected to help them until now. The old woman says she knew Kai would keep things in order, and said the worms were not from this world, and the mystery until then was where they came from. After a lot of study, they managed to use someone with astral projection powers in a laboratory in Germany. The woman managed to send her body in spirit form to the worm world. At first they thought it was an abandoned world that the worms had taken over. But before returning to her own body, that woman discovered something. She saw something humans had no idea about. The worms were speaking an unknown language, and it seemed they didn't act by instinct but had an organized society. And the strangest thing was that they even had something like a deity. It was a statue that the scientists ended up naming the queen. There it became clear that these worms had a social structure and even something that looked like a religion. Recently they have hired interpreters to try to understand what the worms were singing, and discovered it was an ancient language saying we will return soon. That made everyone afraid, and Sarah asks if that meant they were originally from that world. The old woman didn't know how to answer that question yet, but they could predict when they would return, and they would come back in the third wave, which was about to happen. Ian didn't understand anything. However, that second wave was catastrophic and almost put human life at risk. Sarah more than anyone knew how terrible it was. If the third wave really happens, humanity might not be ready to resist. That's why they should learn to work as a team to be prepared when that day comes. The guy doesn't understand anything but gets scared. That's because those two were very serious. Miho asks what that old woman wants them to do. She asks her employee to bring the box. And the main reason for her visit was to launch a cosplay line. This was a clever measure to boost profits. And Sarah asks if she was serious. Selling only underwear wasn't generating enough income, so cosplay would be something much broader. She was the exclusive designer for Nerd, and invested her entire retirement in this business. Besides, she fully entered the clothing business to try to compete with famous brands. And the shameless hero was there supporting this idea. Sarah uses her electric powers, asking the old woman if this was a joke, since they were on a serious topic. And thus begins a general fight inside the office. Someone asks him if the outfit looked good. It was Miss Kai, and she said she was feeling a bit tight. Wearing a maid outfit, she asked if he liked clothes like that. And of course the shameless guy was happy. Miho in another outfit said it was obvious he liked it. However, she thought more aggressive fantasy clothes like hers were much more attractive. And so the two begin to argue about which outfit he would like more. This would be a dream discussion that could only happen in a fantasy world, and they still kept asking how he would like to take the photos. Finally, Sarah appears wearing an Iron Man suit. He gets mad, telling her not to wear a suit like that. At that moment he wakes up, and it was just a dream. They get mad, asking if he thinks about nonsense, even in his dreams. And there he was again asking what time the photo session would start. It was amazing how persistent he was on that subject. He had fainted because of the shock he took from Sarah. Right after, the employee gets ready to take him away. He asked if Mrs. Florinda was feeling well, but she was tired and a bit sore from the shock. But she knew she wouldn't die, because she managed to foresee her future 10 years from now. So she wasn't worried about her death. Before leaving, Sarah appears calling for her. The girl hadn't finished talking to the old woman, and the employee keeps telling him to leave already. Sarah wanted to know when they would save Nicole. They had even watched in the video Grant saying she was alive. The old woman lowers the car window, and says this was not the time, because if they went there without information they would be defeated. But not to worry, because in her visions she was smiling. In her visions Sarah was radiant as before, and we see that she really wasn't as grumpy as she is now. The old woman says she wanted to bring Nicole back as much as she did. And that vision was from 10 years from now. After saying this she leaves, leaving Sarah behind. Miho asks if they really need to wear cosplays since she is a worm hunter, not a model. Our hero tries to convince her to accept. Besides, it was part of her job, so she had no choice. The girl immediately stomps on the shameless guy, asking if he wants to get beaten. With determination, Kai says she will do her best. She will boost the company's sales and won't allow anyone to speak badly about them behind their backs. And they will restore Nerd's former glory, so no one underestimates them anymore. And after all that, they will make them pay with their own lives. The guy still says he will train to take better photos, to sell even more clothes. But we know his real intention here. Kai says she will take the photos, and he asks who will wear the clothes. In response, she says the models will wear the cosplays. The models were arriving at Nerd Company, and she still comments that today's photo session will be cosplay. It seemed they were being followed by someone, and this person had a very strange face. They say Nerd pays very well for the photos, and with that they will be able to buy many expensive items. On the way they get lost and end up in an alley, and start to get scared, saying they feel like someone is chasing them. The platinum-haired girl tells her friend not to try to scare her, and at that moment the pursuer appears flying. He seemed to have some kind of power, and the girls get scared by that. Moments later they manage to arrive at Nerd Company, and explain they were attacked by a strange guy. The worst part is that he seemed to be flying. Because of this traumatic event, they wouldn't be able to take the photos, and the guy gets mad about that. Kai says it's okay and that they could reschedule the photo session for another day. He kept imagining the photo session scene all night, and so he went there saying he would make tea for them to calm down and be able to take the photos. The girl punches him on the head and says the models could rest. They would schedule the photo session for another day. And before leaving, she warns them to be careful. She explains that it was very strange because it seemed the crazy guy was flying. That made them suspect it was someone with powers. And they even say that vision was horrible. I don't know if you understood very well what this guy did, but I'll leave it between the lines. Kai was serious and our hero asks what is going on. They suspect it might be something they already know. And looking at the map, they know exactly where the place the guy appeared was. So they were going to split into 3 groups and watch that area to find him. It was the chance to defeat this guy and take out the worm that was controlling him. Sarah didn't seem very excited about this mission, and said that watching someone would be very tiring. That's why Miss Kai was preparing a trap for him. Because in that region there was a girls' school. The place was very close to the office, so they would set up an ambush. The blonde said that didn't make sense. But she had a plan. Since this guy liked beautiful women, they would use their own beauty. And so they bought female uniforms to wear, intending to attract the man. The two looked like high school students. Sarah looked like an elementary student. And with that they could catch the criminal. Ian thought that was wonderful, and asked if he would also wear a school uniform. They said no because it was a girls' school, so he would have to use another disguise. And the guy ended up putting on a dinosaur costume to hand out flyers, exactly like his old job. They laughed, making fun of him. Sitting on a park bench, he was sad, thinking that at that time he would be in a photo session. Someone arrived with a can of soda, and sitting next to him, we see it was Grant Seo. He even asked who this strange guy was, and they stared at each other. Our hero asked if he knew this guy, and he said more or less. After offering a drink, he asked if this boy was also a devourer. Ian realized that this guy knew ultra-secret information about Nerd, and he said he had also been a member. This made our protagonist excited, and he started asking some questions. Grant asked where Sarah and Kai were, but the boy said they were in disguise today. Ian thought he was looking for them, but the guy said he came to Instinct today to see him. This made the big guy suspicious. Meanwhile, the blonde was in her school disguise. Some girls appeared and asked if Sarah had hired them. She didn't understand anything, and even said they must be confusing her with someone else. It seemed someone had hired these 3 girls to eliminate a ghost, and they even said the blonde girl should explain where this ghost was hiding. One of them even broke a piece of wood on her forehead, showing her strength, and said they were ready to exercise at any moment. One of the girls grabbed a book and started chanting verses, all this to show they had skills to expel ghosts. Sarah thought that was a big nonsense, and they did a little dance saying they were the exorcism group of the girls' school. While they were introducing themselves, Sarah said they were confused. Meanwhile, Kai was playing with a claw machine for plush toys. She was very excited, having lots of fun, and since Miho was grumpy, she kept saying that was a waste of time. However, it would be useful to attract the attention of the man who attacked the models. Nothing would catch attention more than beautiful girls in a shopping corridor in front of the school. That was a perfect trap. And so she managed to get a plush toy, and gave it to her friend, saying it was a way to make peace for what happened last week. And also said that this toy was her favorite from a cartoon. At that moment, someone said they found beautiful girls. It was one of those high school bullies, and he said he would like to go out with them. The guy was full of himself, thinking he was a hottie. In response, Miho told her friend the trap failed. They had attracted the attention of simple teenagers. Kai said she wasn't interested and told him to get lost, while the others said that if they didn't leave soon, she would beat them up. The guy thought these girls were very attractive, and to avoid trouble, Kai dragged her friend out of that place. On the way, the guy grabbed the girl's arm, making the plush toy fall on the floor. The chubby guy said that was rude. And we know Miho is a bit hot-headed, and ended up hitting the chubby guy, throwing him to the ground. Her friend already knew a fight was about to start, and kept saying they provoked it. In a frightening way, she said that bastard shouldn't touch her again. And that hit ended up leaving the chubby guy unconscious on the floor. It was too late and there was no turning back. The bully asked how she managed to do that, and Kai quickly tried to hit the other guy with a kick right on the chin. Luckily he dodged. It wasn't shown here, but for sure he saw a magnificent scene. The leader of the bullies said they were very good at self-defense techniques, and even said it was a shame beautiful girls like them weren't accompanied. It was annoying to hear all that nonsense. And throwing his backpack on the floor, he said he had a proposal. If by chance they managed to take him down, he would leave them alone. But if they couldn't, they would have to go out with him. With much boredom, Miho said to leave it to her. In response, the bully said it could be both of them at the same time. And meanwhile, poor Sarah was being disturbed by teenagers. They wanted her to say quickly where the ghost was. At that moment, a little girl appeared asking if they were the 3 ghost hunters. And at that moment, the girls realized they had confused things. And then they started to cover it up, saying they were waiting for her. Feeling relieved, she said it was very good to have found someone who could help her. And we see that it looked like she had an energy around her body. And it was a worm that was clinging to the poor little girl. Trembling with fear, she asks the 3 hunters to get rid of that creature. And since these 3 girls also had spiritual energy, they could see the worm. Sarah knew that it was a real ghost. Then one of the girls said to leave that to her. Surely they would lose to this ghost because it seemed very strong. But there was something curious. Sarah didn't understand why the ghost simply didn't take over the girl's body. Back to the fight with the bully, he thought he could handle winning. Kai said it was better for him to keep his word, and said she would only let her friend fight him. That seemed like an insult. One of the guys whispered very quietly that they didn't know he was a judo champion. The strange thing was that they seemed super calm. It was as if they were sure they would win. He said that when he defeated them, he would sit on the girl with glasses just to humiliate her. And he had a terrible look, saying this was going to be fun. Very arrogant, he told them to come at him. Then Miss Kai went all out, prepared a knee strike on him, but suddenly changed the move and tried to land a kick, which he managed to dodge. He also said he wouldn't fall for a simple move like that. But it was a trick technique. She only wanted to trap him, so she entwined her leg around the guy's head, then threw him to the ground and sat on top of him. That was kind of humiliating, but he was actually enjoying it. Miho said that her friend was having fun, and the other guys said their friend was very lucky and that they also wanted to be in that position. Other students from the school who were at the mall watched that embarrassing scene. The bully said he was just playing with them. Meanwhile, the girls laughed and mocked him. Ian asks the blonde boy why he wanted to meet him. Actually, Grant was curious because Ian was also a devourer like him. That made our protagonist all excited, saying it was cool to have someone with the same power. And he kept complaining, saying his power was bad and he couldn't control it. He also asked if Sarah was always bothering him. Ian wanted to know why Grant left the job, and he said he had a good reason. Actually, he felt betrayed by Nerd. He looked serious, as if something very important had happened. The scene goes back to a flashback where he was talking to Florentina, and it seemed she didn't fulfill part of an agreement. He had joined Nerd for a reason, but she didn't want to accept his motives, and said she couldn't do anything to help him. The battle of the second wave was catastrophic, and what happened was something she couldn't avoid. She made a rational decision and said he only acted out of revenge. She also said humanity would have to accept living with the worms, and it seemed that was what he disagreed with her about. If you made it this far and want the continuation of this story, don't forget to comment part 2. So that's it, and see you later, everyone.